Chapter 60. I was to have no sense of time for the next 5 days. When I first woke up, I did not know how many hours had passed. I was very thirsty, and that must have been what woke me. I remember one or two things indistinctly. A sense of surprise that I was in my own pajamas, but not in my room at school. Then realizing I was in a bunk at sea, but not in a caique. It was the narrowing forecabin of a yacht. I was reluctant to leave my sleep, to think, to do anything but sink back into it. I was handed a glass of water by the young sailor with crew-cut blonde hair, who had evidently been waiting for me to wake. I was so thirsty that I had to drink the water, even though I could see it was suspiciously cloudy. Then I must have blurred into sleep again. The same man made me go to the heads in the bows of the yacht at some later point, and I remember he had to hold me upright as if I was drunk, and I sat on the pan and just went to sleep again. There were portholes, but the metal shields were screwed down. I asked one or two questions, but he didn't answer, and it didn't seem to matter. The same procedure happened again. Once, twice, I don't know, in different circumstances. This time I was in a room in a proper bed. It was always night, always, if there was light, an electric light, shadowy figures and voices, then darkness. But one morning, it seemed like morning, though it might have been midnight for all I knew, because my watch had stopped. I was woken up by the sailor-cum-nurse, made to sit on my bed, to dress, to walk up and down the room 20 or 30 times. Another man I hadn't seen before stood by the door. I became conscious of something I had hazily thought to have dreamt, an extraordinary mural that dominated the whitewashed wall opposite the bed. It was a huge black figure, larger than life-size, a kind of living skeleton, a Buchenwald horror, lying on its side on what might have been grass or flames. A gaunt hand pointed down to a little mirror hanging on the wall, exhorting me, I supposed, to look at myself, to consider that I must die. The skull face had a startled and startling intensity that made it uncomfortable to look at, and it was no comfort to think of the mind that had put it there for me. I could see it was newly painted. There was a knock on the door. A third man appeared. He carried a tray with a jug of coffee on it. It had the most beautiful smell of real coffee, something like Blue Mountain, not the monotonous Turkish powder they use in Greece. And there were rolls, butter, and quince marmalade, a plate of ham and eggs. I was left alone. In spite of the circumstances, it was one of the best breakfasts of my life. Every flavor had a Proustian mescaline intensity. I seemed to be starving, and I ate everything on the tray. I drank every drop of coffee, and I could have done it all over again. There was even a pack of American cigarettes and a box of matches. I took stock. I was wearing one of my own pullovers and whipcord trousers I hadn't put on since the winter. The high curved ceiling was that of a cistern under a house. The windowless walls were dry but subterranean. There was electric light. A small suitcase, my own, stood in a corner. My jacket was by it, on a hanger hooked to a nail. The wall against which the table stood was new built of brick. It had a heavy wooden door in it. No handle, no spy hole, no keyhole, not even a hinge. I gave it a push, but it was bolted or barred outside. There was another triangular table in the corner, an old-fashioned washbowl with a sanitary bucket underneath. I rummaged in my suitcase, a clean shirt, a change of underclothes, a pair of summer trousers. I saw my razor, and that reminded me that I had a clock of sorts on my chin. At least 2 days' stubble stared at me from the mirror. My face was strange to me, degraded, and yet peculiarly indifferent. I looked up at the death figure on the wall above. Death figure, death cell, the traditional last breakfast, a mock execution was about the only indignity I had left to undergo. Behind and beneath everything there was the vile and unforgivable, the ultimate betrayal not just of me, but of all finer instincts, by Julie, Lily, whoever she was. I started to think of her as Lily again, perhaps because her first mask now seemed truer, more true because more obviously false than the others. I tried to imagine what she really was, obviously a consummate young actress, and consummately immoral into the bargain. Only a prostitute could have behaved as she had, a pair of prostitutes, because I guessed that her sister, June, Rose, might well have been prepared to carry out that final abominable act. Probably they would have liked me to be thus doubly humiliated. All their stories had been lies or ground bait. The letters were plainly forgeries. They could not make it so easy for me to trace them. In a grim flash, I guessed, none of my post left or came to the island unread. From that, I leaped to the grim realization that they must all along have known the truth about Allison. When Conchis had advised me to go back and marry her, he must have known she was dead. Lily must have known she was dead. My mind plunged sickeningly, as if I had walked off the edge of the world. I had seen forged newspaper cuttings about the sisters. Therefore, if it was just a case of forging cuttings, I went to my jacket, where I had put Ann Taylor's letter after June had read it outside the school gates. It was still there. I stared at it and its attachments, searched for some sign that they were all invented, in vain. I remembered that other envelope that I had left in my room and not shown her, with its superscription in Allison's own handwriting, the pathetic little tangle of withered flowers. Only she could have given them that. Allison. I stared into my own eyes in the mirror. Suddenly her honesty, her untreachery, her true death was the last anchor left. I was swept away. The whole of life became a conspiracy. I strained back through time to seize Allison, to be absolutely sure of her, to seize a quintessential Allison beyond all her powers of love or hate, beyond all their corrupting. For a while I let my mind wander into a bottomless madness, supposing all my life that last year had been the very opposite of what Conchis so often said, so often, to trick me once again about life in general. That is, the very opposite of hazard, the flat in Russell Square. But I had got it by answering a chance advertisement in the New Statesman, meeting Allison that very first evening. But I might so easily have not gone to the party, not have waited those few minutes, and Margaret, Ann Taylor, all of them. The hypothesis became top-heavy and crashed. I stared at myself. They were trying to drive me mad, to brainwash me in some astounding way, but I clung to reality. I clung, too, to something in Allison, something like a tiny limpid crystal of eternal non-betrayal, like a light in the darkest night, like a teardrop, an eternal inability to be so cruel. And the tears that for a brief moment formed in my own eyes were a kind of bitter guarantee that she was indeed dead. They were not only tears for her, but also tears of rage at Conchis and Lily, at the certainty that they knew she was dead and were using this new doubt, this torturing possibility that could not be a possibility, to rack me, to perform on me for some incomprehensible reason a viciously cruel vivisection of the mind, as if they only wanted to punish me, and punish me, and punish me again, with no right and no reason. I sat with my hands clenched against my head. Fragments of things they had said kept on coming back with dreadful double meanings, a constant dramatic irony. Almost every line Conchis and Lily had spoken was ironic, right up to that last, transparently double-meaning dialogue with June. That blank weekend, of course they had canceled it to give me reasonable time to receive the letter of reference from the bank, holding me back only to hurl me faster down the slope. Again and again, images of Lily, the Lily of the Julie phase, surged back. Moments of passion, that last total surrender of her body, and other moments of gentleness, sincerity, spontaneous moments that could not have been rehearsed, but could only have sprung out of a deep identification with the part she was playing. I even went back to that earlier theory I had had, that she was acting under hypnosis, but it wasn't conceivable. I lit another Philip Morris. I tried to think of the present, but everything drove me back to the same anger, the same profound humiliation. Only one thing could ever give me relief, some equal humiliation of Lily. It made me furious that I had not been more violent with her before. That was indeed the ultimate indignity, that my own small stock of decency had been used against me. There was noise outside and the door opened. The crew-cut blonde sailor came in. Behind him was one of the other men in the same black trousers, black shirt, black gym shoes, and behind him came Anton. He was in a doctor's collarless white overall, a pocket with pens, a bright German-accented voice as if on his rounds, and he had no limp now. "How are you feeling?" I stared at him, controlled myself. "Wonderful. Enjoying every minute of it." He looked at the breakfast tray. "You would like more coffee?" I nodded. He gestured to the second man, who took the tray out. Anton sat on the chair by the table, and the young sailor leaned easily against the door. Beyond appeared a long corridor, and right at the end, steps leading up to daylight. It was much too big a cistern for a private house. Anton watched me. I refused to speak, and we sat there in silence for some time. "I am a doctor. I come to examine you." He studied me. "You feel not too bad?" I leaned back against the wall, stared at him. He waved his finger reprovingly. "Please to answer." I love being humiliated. I love having a girl I like trampling over every human decency. Every time that stupid old booger tells me another lie, I feel thrills of ecstasy run down my spine. I shouted, "Now where the hell am I?" He gave me the impression that my words were meaningless. It was my manner he was watching. He said slowly, "Good, you have woken up." He sat with his legs crossed, leaning back a little, a very fair imitation of a doctor in his consulting room. "Where's that little tart?" He seemed not to understand. "Lily, Julie, whatever her name is." He smiled. "Tart means bad woman?" I shut my eyes. My head was beginning to ache. I had to keep cool. The man in the door turned. The second man appeared down the distant steps with a tray and came and put it on the table. Anton poured out a cup for me and one for himself. The sailor passed me mine. Anton swallowed his quickly. "My friend, you were wrong. She is a good girl, very intelligent, very brave. Oh, yes." He contradicted my sneer. "Very brave. All I have to say to you is that when I get out of here, I'm going to create such bloody fucking hell for all of you that you'll wish to Christ you." He raised his hand, calmingly, forgivingly. "Your mind is not well. We have given you many drugs these last days." I took a breath. "How many days?" "It is Sunday. 3 totally missing days. I remembered the wretched exam papers, the boys, the other masters. The whole school could not be in league with conscience. It was the enormity of the abuse that bewildered me, far more than the aftermath of the drug. That they could crash through law, through my job, through respect for the dead, through everything that made the world customary and habitable and orientated. And it was not only a denial of my world, it was a denial of what I had come to understand was conscience's world. I stared at Anton. "I suppose this is all good, homely fun to you Germans." "I am Swiss, and my mother is Jewish, by the way." His eyebrows were very heavy, charcoal tufts, his eyes amused. I swilled the last of the coffee in my cup, then threw it in his face. It stained his white coat. He pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his face and said something to the man beside him. He did not look angry, merely shrugged, then glanced at his watch. The time is 10:38. Today we have the trial, and you must be awoke. So good. He touched his coat. I think you are awoke. He stood up. Trial? Very soon we shall go, and you will judge us. Judge you? Yes, you think this is like a prison? Not at all. It is like, how call you the room where the judge lives? Chambers. Ah, so, chambers. So perhaps you would like to... He gestured round his chin. Christ. There will be many people there. I stared incredulously at him. It will look better. He gave up. Very well, Adam. He nodded at the blonde head, stressing the name on the second syllable. He will return in 20 minutes to prepare you. Prepare me? It is nothing. We have a small ritual. It is nothing for you. For us. Us? Very soon you will understand all. I wished I had saved the coffee to throw till then. He smiled, bowed, and went out. The other two closed the door, and a bolt was shot. I stared at the skeleton at the wall, and in his necromantic way he seemed to say the same. Very soon you will understand all.